Okay, we're talking about this idea of inflation and inflation as a tax. So I want to expand on this for a minute and say, if my brother, my older brother now, who's now retired, if he was making $3,000 in 1965, he could afford to buy a brand new GTO. But if he wanted to buy a brand new GTO, this might be a little stretch, but if we say this machine is basically the same grins and giggles and fun as this machine, if we can make that comparison, that this is equivalent to that, how much is he going to have to make 40 years later just to be able to buy the same economic good? 10 times as much. In other words, you have to be making 10 times more here than here just to have the same standard of living that we had back here. Now again, Keynes called that a form of a tax, a subtle tax, a tax in which people are losing purchasing power. They're losing their standard of living. Their bank account's not going down. They're not writing a check, but they are losing wealth. They're losing their standard of living. So let's try this again. And I did this with a Hewlett-Packard 12C calculator, and I came pretty close, but I'll just round the numbers. If my brother was able to figure out an investment that would grow from here, 40 years later, it would continue to grow to here. So that with this $3,000, all he had to do was wait 40 years, and he'd have $30,000, and he could pay for his GTO, and we'll take the IRS out of the picture for a second. You can't really take it out of the picture, but we'll leave it out of the picture, right? As if it doesn't exist. What kind of rate of return, annual rate of return, would he have to get on an investment to make this thing grow to this number? And it's a reiterative calculation where you plug in any three of the four, and so this would be present value, this would be future value, this would be the time period, and so we're asking what would be the interest rate on this investment to get that. And just to round it up slightly, it's basically really close to 6% per year. For 40 years, you would have to get 6% per year after tax in order to get this amount of money, so you could buy the same GTO thing that you could buy back here. Now, I don't know if you have a feel for this, but do you know of any investment that consistently gives 6% per year, good on the average over that period of time? I don't either. That you don't have to say how much you're getting on your savings account. It's considerably less than this. You can divide by 6, and it's still considerably less than that. Stated another way, to have the same standard of living 40 years after this event here, if you're working for a company, you better get a 6% raise every single year, or your standard of living is going to be going down. Now, put that in perspective. Do you know anybody who's working for a company, average ordinary worker, who gets a 6% raise every single year like clockwork? I don't either. What does it mean? It means that people's standard of living is going south, and they are experiencing what Keynes called the inflation tax. Now, he wasn't saying it was all that bad. He didn't say it was necessarily a bad thing. He just simply is saying it's the way that the government can tax the people without actually raising taxes. It's called the inflationary tax. Now, we could play this game back and forth, but I just wanted to give you a feel for that, because when we get to GDP and comparing how well is our economy doing, and we say, well, how much new stuff did we produce and buy this year compared to last year? And if we just looked at the dollars, and we looked at all the stuff that people bought in 1965, and we compared that to all the stuff that people bought in the year 2005, 40 years later, if we just looked at the raw numbers, we'd say, wow, Man, people are 10 times wealthier here than they are back here. Woo, we're 10 times wealthier. Really? No, actually not. And that's going to take us into the section where we're talking about real GDP versus nominal inflation adjusted. No, nominal GDP, which is just the straight numbers, versus inflation adjusted GDP, which is the real GDP. So now you've got, I'm going to leave that there for a second here and talk about something that we could do. We don't always have to take the government's statistics at face value and just say, that's what it is. They tell me that's what inflation is, so I guess that's what it is. Now, we're not going to do it in this class, but let's just assume for a second that I give you and you and you and you and you a grocery list. And on that grocery list is 1 dozen medium eggs and 1 gallon of whole milk and a 5-pound bag of flour and a 5-pound bag of sugar and a 6-pack roll of toilet paper and a pound of butter and just common ordinary things that people buy. And I send you to Save-A-Lot, and I send you to Myers, and I send you to Hawkins, and I send you to Walmart, and I send you, where else could I send somebody? Did I run through them all? IGA. I was IGA. And you all come back, right? Now, you don't have to buy anything. You just go into the store and you just write down what it would be, okay? And we write it down, and you come up with a number, and he comes up with a number, and he comes up with a number, and she comes up with a different number. And we just average them together. And we say, just for a round number, let's say that we come up with $105. Say we come up with $105 as the average of all these stores that we went. And we say, hey, I wonder a year ago, when Professor Justice had a class a year ago do this, I wonder what it cost for all that same stuff last year. What did the students get last year? And we look at the records and we go, oh, well, last year they only had to spend $100 to get all that stuff. But this year we got to spend $105. What would the price inflation be? 5%. So if you really want to do your own studies of what is the inflation rate, it could be as easy as going to your great aunt's or grandmother's house and say, can I go up in the attic? I'd just like to rummage around in the attic. And that's where she has all the china, and you take things and you wrap them up in newspaper so they won't break, and you put them into boxes to store them. So you just take the stuff out of the box and you open up the newspaper until you can find a page that has an advertisement for some grocery store selling 5 pounds of coffee or eggs or milk or whatever, and you just write down the prices that you find 20-some, 30-some, 40-some years ago and compare it with the prices today, and you can do your own inflation studies. You don't have to take anybody's word for whether prices are going up or not. You can do it yourself. Now we're going to do an exercise on that. And let me see if there's anything else I want to say about that before we go to the next thing. And I think we're going to cut off there, and then we're going to talk about the names of the various ways that we can measure price inflation.